Next on AM 1480 WLEA, the Newsmaker Show. Here's Brian O'Neill.
And glad to have with us on our Newsmaker Show live this morning, Assembly GOP leader Will Barclay. Assemblyman Barclay, thank you for joining us.
Brian, thank you for having me. Good morning.
Good morning. I wanted to start off with a question that's kind of, sort of off the usual state politics questions. As you know, and as our listeners know, former Vice President Joe Biden won down in Carolina over the weekend, and he seems to be more favored by the Democrat establishment nationally than Bernie Sanders. Do you have any sense, Assemblyman Barclay, would Governor Andrew Cuomo run for vice president if Joe Biden is the Democrats' candidate for president? Your thoughts?
Hasn't the governor endorsed Biden, or at least he's indicated that he would endorse Biden?
Yes.
I don't know if his play is to be vice president by supporting him. I still think there's a long road to go for Biden to get the nomination. I think as a Republican, I think Bernie Sanders would be a better matchup for President Trump. But if Biden gets it, the question, I guess, what does Cuomo bring to the table for him? Cuomo is governor of a large state, but he's a liberal, I guess. Maybe you could say to balance out the supposed moderation of Biden. But it's also coming from New York, which is obviously a very blue state. I don't know if him bringing Cuomo on is going to really bring any new territory for Biden if he does turn out to be the Democratic nominee. So that's an interesting question. I think Cuomo I wouldn't be surprised if he'd like to be VP, but whether he can do it or whether he brings anything to the ticket, I think is questionable.
Yes, and Governor Andrew Cuomo has said, oh, no, I'm not going to Washington. I'm staying right here in Albany. But if the offer was made, I bet he would take a serious thought about jumping down to Washington. What do you think, Assemblyman Barclay?
I agree. Completely. I'm glad that he says he's not focusing on federal politics, but, I think almost any elected official always has their eye on maybe a higher office, and I don't think Andrew Cuomo has been, any indication that he thinks differently. And whatever, as long as he's focused, we need focus on New York State. We got massive issues going on in the state right now, and it needs leadership. And so I hope the governor doesn't get too carried away with the hopes that he, to try to focus on becoming vice president, because we need leadership here in New York now.
Well, we'll see what happens there. Talking with Assembly GOP leader Will Barclay today. Wondering, always talk of redistricting after a political party changes majority. Now with the Democrats in charge of both houses, the state Senate and the state Assembly, any talk of redistricting the seat maps for the state Assembly at this point?
Well, it's a little early, but there is a little bit of talk because, things are a little different than they are in years past. We have an independent redistricting commission that was passed as a constitutionally charged commission. And believe it or not, Brian, you may be shocked to hear this, but it's actually a bipartisan commission. I had 2 appointees to it. Every legislative leader has appointees to it, so there's an equal number of Democrat, Republicans on the commission. They're charged, I think we've made our appointees to it, and then the commission has to be, impaneled. There's 2 executive directors, and they're charged with coming up with supposedly nonpartisan maps that will be used for redistricting going into 2022. We'll see how that plays, and then they come out with their plan, and the legislature has to approve their plan, and that's why it's critical. Here right now, we have 43 members in our 42. Members in our House. It's critical that we get over 50, so we have a third plus one. So we have a say when the commission comes out with a plan, or whether that plan gets accepted or not by the legislature and the governor.
You talk about the legislative leaders. That got me thinking. For years, the complaint from state lawmakers was that all decisions on the budget and all big decisions were made by 3 men in a room. When they said 3 men in a room, they were basically talking about Sheldon Silver, Joe Bruno, and whoever the governor was at the time, depending on the year. Bruno, of course, the former Senate Majority Leader, Silver, the former Assembly Speaker. Is that still the case, even though it's not all men these days, and it would maybe be more than three? Do you find that still to be the case about all decisions being made by a small group of people at the top in Albany?
Yeah, unfortunately, this institution is very leadership driven, and I do see that being the case. Hope springs eternal. This is the first time I've served as leader going through a budget process, so we are certainly hammering on the fact that we don't think 3 men, or in this case now it's 2 men and a woman, in a room is the best way to go about things. We think an open process will bring better public policy in the end. So we're going to keep pushing that. And it is unfortunate because there's no reason it has to be this way. Other states and the federal government even have a much more transparent system when it comes to budgeting or making big decisions. And this gets to be, what happens. 3 people get in a room and they horse trade. And ultimately we end up with bad public policy. And I point to exhibit number 1 in that situation is I know you've been talking a lot about it, but the bail reform situation that was passed last year in the budget. We think we should repeal that law and have open hearings, listen to the public, listen to law enforcement, listen to the district attorneys to try to, we're not against having bail reform, but we think it should be legislated in an open, transparent manner. And obviously doing something like 3 men in the room or something where just 3 leaders get together and horse trade, I think it leads to bad public policy ultimately, and it's not a good way of doing things.
For years, it was Assembly Speaker Democrat Sheldon Silver ruling the state assembly, they say, with an iron fist. Have things loosened up a little bit in terms of freedom for other legislators, such as yourself in the assembly minority position, under Assembly Speaker Carl Heastie?
Well, I would say this about the current speaker. He, compared to the Silver, I don't want to compare the two, but I have a much better relationship with Heastie than I did with Silver. Now, I wasn't leader when Silver was the speaker, but Hastie's just a much more gregarious type guy, and I feel like, he's someone that at least you could have a conversation with, where I think Speaker Silver was a tougher person to deal with. That being said, and I think I respect Speaker Hastie's, I think he's acting in a professional manner, but has different priorities and sees governing different than I see governing. And I told him, which I tell anybody, I will treat them in a very professional manner, but where we differ on policy, I'm not going to back down, and our conference not going to back down, and we're going to, speak out very loudly on issues that we think are important or where we think the speaker or the majority is going wrong. The same with the governor and same with the Democrats in the Senate. So, yeah, there's a little bit of difference there, but we still are dealing with the power structures in Albany and still dealing with the, so-called 3 men in the room situation.
On the topic of Albany politics, Congressman Tom Reed's been weighing in a lot lately on the state government issues, such as you mentioned earlier, bail reform. And it's no secret that Reed could run for governor. Do you think that Congressman Tom Reed is the front runner at the moment among Albany Republicans as far as who's going to run for governor on the Republican side?
That's funny. You're the first person to ask me about who would run for governor on the Republican side. I think it's so premature, it's hard to say. But let me tell you this. If Tom Reed did decide to run for governor, I think he'd be a terrific candidate. He was just down in Albany last week. We had a briefing from the Department of Homeland Security on this, that because of the green light bill and giving driver's license to illegal aliens, the Trump administration, Department of Homeland Security, has not allowed New Yorkers to be part of the Trusted Traveler program. And it really goes to the fact that New York doesn't allow sharing with federal law enforcement, particularly Border Patrol and ICE, the use of New York State DMV database and other critical tools that law enforcement needs to use. So Congressman Reed was kind enough to come down and bring a number of people from the federal government, including people from the Department of Homeland Security, to brief not only the Assembly Republicans, but also the Senate Republicans. We did a big briefing, and then we had a press conference afterwards to discuss that briefing. So he is showing great leadership on this issue, but he's a leader not only in New York, but I think he's a leader down in Washington. So I think we'd be, New York Republicans and New Yorkers would be, happy or should be happy if he, is interested and decides to run for governor.
And if the New York City Democrats keep up their extremist tendencies, that might help you as well. Yeah. Just because I think it's a turnoff even to some Democrats on what's coming out of New York City these days.
Yeah, that should put a lot of concerns for upstate Democrats. It's really dominated by New York City. Every leader other than myself is, and you could say Stuart Cousins from Westchester, which is close to New York City. But you got the governor, you got every statewide seat held by a person from New York City, and then you obviously have the speaker and the majority leader, as I said, is from Westchester. So, it really is a city-centric domination right now, and as I said, there's just a simple disconnect, and they have these extremely liberal policies coming out. The interesting, not to take all the time with bail reform, but the interesting thing about bail reform, they don't even like it in New York City because it really is a public protection crisis that they're having down there. So that issue is so extreme that even their own constituents are pushing back on it. So that issue, whether you're in rural areas, urban areas, upstate, downstate, there seems to be uniform feelings that needs to be repealed.
Okay, we're going to take a quick break talking to Assembly GOP leader Will Barclay. Stay with us here on the Monday edition of the Newsmaker Show.
The Ryan Agencies, your local independent insurance agencies. At the Ryan Agency, they work hard to find the right coverage at the best rate. Their agents shop more than 24 insurance companies to discover your best price. Save smart. Contact the Ryan Agencies today for your best price.
Insurance protection you can rely on. The Ryan Agency.
Checking in now with meteorologist Rob Carolyn. Hey, Rob, how's it looking for today and the rest of the week?
Well, Brian, it's looking a whole lot warmer than it was over the weekend. We've got noticeably milder air flowing into the region, and that's going to result in temperatures over the course of the next couple of days running above normal, particularly today and tomorrow. Then it looks like tail end of this week, things will start to cool off quite a bit. Got some showers crossing the southern tier this morning, Brian, so some hit-and-miss light rain today. It'll be breezy, close to 50. Sunrise this morning was at 6:43. Sun will set tonight at 6:01. Tonight we're cloudy. We'll see some rain. May start to mix with some wet snow after midnight. We're going to fall back to about 30 to 35. Looks like a cloudy day coming up for tomorrow. We may see a passing rain or snow shower. Snow showers confined to tomorrow morning. By the afternoon, it's too warm for that. Temperatures will be 45 to 50. Tomorrow night, a couple of showers. They may mix with some wet snow before they end. Lows 30 to 35. Wednesday, clouds, some sunshine, and maybe a rain or snow shower. Cooler Wednesday, 40 to 45. And we'll continue to see a cool off Thursday and Friday, Brian.
Back with Assembly Republican leader Will Barclay. Assemblyman Barclay, you referenced in the first segment how you went to that big press conference there that was held, I believe, by Department of Homeland Security and Immigrations and Customs Reforms and what was the other one? The U.S. Attorney's Office. And you talked about how the agents were very concerned. We've heard a lot about that press conference, but it was a very interesting one, and a lot of interesting information came out of it, especially when they talked, let me put it this way. Congressman Tom Reed, in his weekly press call last week, spoke of agents wondering as they were looking at suspects coming across the Peace Bridge. Who is this guy? I can't find out anymore because the governor's got my hands tied on the database for the Department of Motor Vehicles. I can't access that anymore in a lot of cases. Can you give us any stories about the information that was relayed by ICE and Homeland Security on those issues?
Well, I think Congressman Reed is right on point with that, and that's what we heard very strongly by the way, these are not partisan agents. These are professional people. That one guy had worked in law enforcement on the federal level for over 30 years, so he'd worked for both Democrats and Republicans. But they said how critical it was to have access to that DMV database. They said every investigation begins with a search of the DMV database. It's really of interest, Brian. There's other states that have, I hate to keep calling this a green light bill, because it gives something positive to the thing, where it's really giving driver's license to illegal aliens. Whether you agree or disagree with that, other states have that policy, but none of them restrict the way New York restricts the sharing of really critical information with law enforcement. Why are we putting our law enforcement agents, our federal law enforcement agents, but even our local law enforcement at risk to try to protect a class of people, illegal aliens in this case? It seems like that's crazy. If we want to give them driver's license, we can debate the merits of that, but we shouldn't be handcuffing law enforcement to be able to do their jobs that they're mandated to do by the federal law. And it's not just ICE. It's not just to deport people. These are to try to catch bad people trying to come into New York or the United States to do bad things. Don't we want to give law enforcement the tools they can do to combat that?
Yeah, reading off ICE's website here, and they're talking about the press conference that was held the other day. It says, ICE is not asking the state of New York to provide a list of illegal aliens or to identify which individuals in its databases are here illegally. ICE needs access to the information, just like all other law enforcement agencies that work the state, to support investigative efforts not only in New York State but across the country and across the world. And it goes on to say that ICE's ability to identify and dismantle a transnational criminal organization often depends on getting the right piece of information into the right hands at the right time.
Right. I think they even would. I don't want to get into what could be negotiated. The problem is the law states that New York cannot share information with Border Patrol and ICE. That's statutory. So the governor's got to get the speaker and the majority leader and the Democrats in both houses together on this and say this is crazy, this is extreme, and the law has to be changed. The problem is New Yorkers are going to keep suffering as a result. We're not going to be able to use the Trusted Travelers Program. Potentially, we don't know, but potentially those types of limits to federal programs could be expanded. We didn't get into the pre-check, TSA pre-check, but it's not hard to envision that possibly New Yorkers could be banned from that program also, although that deals with domestic. This is more international. But the fact is we shouldn't be limiting our law enforcement, federal law enforcement, from access to the DMV database, and we shouldn't be doing it just to protect a class of people that are in the country illegally.
Yeah, that's a great point. It seems these days, and not to sound like Tucker Carlson here, but it seems that these days the New York City Democrats are more interested in the groups coming in from out of the country than they are the people who are already in New York City. Am I wrong there?
Yeah, that's my point exactly, Brian. And listen, I don't want to get in a big debate because I know it's very contentious about immigration.
Right. And like I said, I don't want to sound like Tucker here, but go ahead.
It's a federal issue. It should be dealt on the federal. I happen to be very pro-immigrant. We all came from other countries at one time, and I think, frankly, we need more people in New York, but we should have it done in a legal manner is what I'm saying. And why are we protecting those here that are illegal at the expense of actual, New York State residents and citizens? Seems a bit misguided as when it comes to priorities.
Down to the last 90 seconds or so. Assemblyman Republican leader Will Barclay, where does the deal stand between Governor Andrew Cuomo and President Donald Trump on the green light law?
So I think the problem is I think the president would be open to, again, I'm surmising some, but what I've heard is he's open to working with New York State. I don't think he wants to ban us from the Trusted Travelers Program. The problem is the only way they can allow us to be back in that program is to change what's already in statute with the sharing of the DMV information. You get me? So it has to be done legislatively with the governor's approval. So the only way the governor is going to be able to get this done is he's going to have to get the legislative majorities to agree. And these people, as I said, they have some extreme views on things like this, and I think it's going to be very hard to get them to move to get a majority in both houses and to change the law. So I think it's really a very big problem. It's going to take tremendous leadership from this governor, and I haven't gotten any indication that he's willing to show that leadership. I think he's rather just go and bash the president, saying he's being some sort of vendetta against New York State, which I don't see that being the case at all.
With that, we have to leave it. Assemblyman Barclay, it was great having you on today. Thanks for calling in.
Yeah, my pleasure, Brian. Nice to talk to you, and hopefully we can do it again in the future.